Hello, BookTube. It's a beautiful, clear, warm spring day here in Boston. I know it's early March. There should be piles of snow on the ground. There should be black ice on the sidewalk. But it is a bright, beautiful spring day, and it is about the 50th bright, beautiful spring day that we have had this winter. We've had a couple of really cold days, one day that was so cold that it broke records. But who cares? Who cares about spikes on a stenograph needle when every other day is bright and dry and clear and blue skied and in the mid 50s to low 60s? Who cares? Who cares about little spikes? This has been a year without a winter. Once again, the forecasters are talking about snow in the forecast for the weekend. Once again, I do not believe that it will happen, or if it does, it will happen for an afternoon in flurries that don't even stick to the ground, and that are gone the next day when the temperatures go back up to the mid-50s, low 60s. Of course, that's the end of the world. But I'm describing the end of the world. Nobody cares. But I'm describing the end of the world. But the silver lining is that it was beautiful weather to go to the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston. I was there last week with David Murphy, and he made a second trip without me. But I hadn't been back since then. I've had a lot of stuff to do. In fact, today I do have a lot of stuff to do. I promised you all that I would not be making videos on Wednesday and Thursday, and that Thursday was the bad day of the two. But what can I say? I'm willing to overexert myself for my imaginary BookTube friends. So I went to the Brattle. I went to the Brattle, had a great time, talked with everybody. Had the Brattle is, for those of you who don't, new to the channel, it's a used bookstore. It's 3 stories, and it's jam-packed with books. It's just fantastic. But in addition to that, there's a sale lot next door. Not a sale barrow or two, but a whole lot. The whole floor plan of another store. With thousands more books out there. Thousands of them. And I had the entire sale lot entirely to myself without a single other browser for the whole time that I was there this morning. So that seldom happens. Even early on in the day, that seldom happens. So I got a pile of books that I want to show you. This is not the whole pile. I put the whole pile in a tote bag and in the leather shoulder bag. Learned a lot about the leather shoulder bag. We definitely need a Bag Tuesday update. Do Bag Tuesdays updates have to happen on Tuesdays? I don't know. I don't want to run afoul of Aaron Facer and disappear like so many people have who've run afoul of him. But the books did make it back here, and I want to show them to you, starting with a couple of mass market paperbacks. This one is one that I have in the Library of America, and I also have it in a cute little hardcover, right within reach. I could almost grab it here. But I found the mass market paperback that I read it in originally and loved it. This is The 20s by Edmund Wilson. In this great illustrated mass market. I remember when all the mass markets looked like this, especially Bantam. And this is just, periodic essays, slice of life essays about the 20s. It was not meant to be a comprehensive history of the 20s. It was not written ahead of time with any kind of goal in mind. This is all occasional prose, but I love Wilson's occasional prose. And I haven't seen this edition in quite some time, so I grabbed it. Then I found a Penguin Mass Market. I found 2 Penguin Classics today. I found a Penguin Mass Market that is certainly in much better shape. It's in brand new shape. And the one that I have, I've read it so many times that it is kind of falling apart. This is 14 Byzantine Rulers by Michael Psellus, who knew quite a few of those rulers and was an advisor to quite a few of them before they were rulers, so they knew to trust him. And he is absolutely invaluable. He had access to these people and to their private documents and to any kinds of public historical documents. He's fascinating to read. This is a translation by E.R.A. Souter from the era where the early, the mid-20th century era where Penguin Classics translators were very much encouraged to have 15 alphabet soup initials in front of their surname. Absolutely ridiculous, but they all do it. And I found this copy in perfect condition to replace the one that I have. And we'll get to the other Penguin Classic. Well, actually, let's do the other Penguin Classic now. I found this. A trade paperback of Paradise Lost. I think I've had a Penguin Paradise Lost before, but I know that I've never had this. Fantastic. So I will read the introduction and the notes, and then off on the shelf it will go until we perhaps do a read-along of Paradise Lost. Been threatening it for years. The notes are all done here by John Leonard, who is... he's taught at the University of Cambridge, Ottawa, and Western Ontario, and he's published widely on Milton. Okay. So it's not my John Leonard. It's not the book critic, John Leonard. Once upon a time, a weird and strange and garrulous prince of my profession, and one of the only book critics in relatively modern times who came anywhere near my level of productivity or my level of omnivorousness. Which is something. You could never be sure, never 100% sure, that a book you were looking at in the basement of the Strand or wherever would absolutely not interest John. You couldn't be 100% sure of that, virtually, no matter what book it was. And I'd like to think you can't be sure of that with me either, except that I write reviews of books that are useful. And John never wrote a useful book review in his life. He wrote something else entirely. His book reviews were not useful to you in determining anything really hard and fast about the book. Maybe you'll say none of them are. But his were more along the lines of, well, I'm going to read this review, and when I finish with it, the extent to which I want to have a beer with the author of the review will prompt me to get the book. Because if he has these jazzy things to say about it, then maybe I will too. Can't argue with success. It worked. He had a huge, huge readership, but it's not him. It's not that John Leonard. The day when that John Leonard gets into the Penguin Classic lineup. I hate to say it, but he would agree that Pauline Kael should get there first. But anyway, that's critic insider baseball. He's not around anymore, and this is a Penguin Classic trade paperback that I have never had. So fantastic. Then I found another trade paperback, and this one was sun bleached on the spine in a way that is unacceptable to me. So I'm going to have to take a pen to this and write something on the spine. I'm never going to get rid of it again. It's a trade paperback of the collected essays of Graham Greene. And you see the sun has completely obliterated the white letters there. It still has his name, but I don't want to look at this and wonder what it is. So, and this is occasional prose of his. This is book reviews. This is book reviews. Because even once he was Graham Greene, even once everybody knew who he was, even though he was a household name as an author, like I've said many times on this channel, you don't stop doing this work. Once you do it and get the taste for it, you don't really stop. Most people that I know don't really stop. They don't ever turn their back on it completely. So that you have major literary figures, like, Edmund Wilson or Gore Vidal. You have major literary figures who are getting their streams of income from a school, a lecture series, their book revenues, Anthony Burgess. They're still not going to turn down a book review. They're still going to keep a steady stream of book reviews going, and they still love getting galley copies in the mail. And Greene did that. I'm sure that there's probably a preface to this thing. I'm sure that he tries to put airs on it, but that's what this is. This is collected book reviews. And I think he's wonderful as that. It'd be great to be a snapshot of what was crossing his desk at the time. I don't think I've read all but a handful of these. Some of them have probably been excerpted in review anthologies that I've read, but most of them will be new to me, I'm sure. So I'm going to reinforce this. This is a paperback. I'm going to reinforce this in the barbaric way that you purists don't want to hear about. And in addition to that, I'm going to write something on the spine. Oh my God, horrible. Let's just pass on. Then the other trade paperback that I got is something I mentioned to one of you. One of you sent me an email asking me about recommendations for travel writing, anthologies, adventure writing, that sort of thing. And it reminded me of this series, and I found one. This was a long series. There are lots of volumes in this series. This one is called Storm, edited by Clint Willis. And these are, they all look like this. They have something at the top there. I wonder if this will give me the list of these things. Maybe it will give me a list of what's in this series. Okay, well, Ice is one of them. Okay, there's lots of them, yeah. Ice, Rough Water, Wild, Rescue, Flood, The War, High, Epic, Climb. They all look like that. They all look like that. And the editorial job putting these things together is really good. They have a nice solid binding, and they have the French flaps. And I would, whenever I see these things, I once had them all. And they're anthologies that are really, really good. And I got rid of them one by one. I got rid of them. I would love to have the High Water one back and the Ice one back. But this is Storm. This is a wide variety of authors on storms on land and at sea. We have Barry Lopez, Wallace Stegner, Annie Proulx, Sebastian Junger, Gary Paulson, John Muir, Tolstoy. There's Ernest Gann, who's now completely forgotten, but wrote Fate is the Hunter. I'm sure that I'm going to love this, and I was reminded of it by book 2. And then we have a stack of hardcovers. Lots and lots of hardcovers. The first one, I resisted the temptation. The sale lot actually had 2 copies. And usually when I see a copy of a book and I think, nah, I might be tempted, but not really, and then I move on, and 5 carts later I see another copy of it, I think that's the fates of the Brattle pushing me. Don't decline this invitation. If you want to have fun hunting next time, take our suggestion. This is the thing I try to avoid. Some of you will know, some of you have actually seen, that I have a huge bookcase crammed and double crammed with collections of that Graham Greene type thing, of literary essays, literary reviews, prefaces, that sort of thing. I have a huge bookcase full of those things. And I love it. I use that bookcase a lot. I use it more than anything else. I've made a strict rule for myself that is enough. That is enough. You do not need to expand that to either big books of movie criticism or especially books of theater criticism. I used to go to the theater all the time. I love theater criticism, absolutely love it. But the minute you set foot down that path, you have at least as many books, if not more, to choose from. Because theater criticism was being collected in books long before book criticism was, unless you were, Lawrence Stern or somebody. It would be unending. And so I've made a sort of ironclad rule that no matter how tempting it looks, I won't get it. I've broken that rule a couple of times, and I broke it today. The book that I found is in perfect condition. It's got a plastic dust jacket on it. It's by a great critic, and it is a great book. It's a monument of theater criticism. So that's what I told myself. I got Curtains by Kenneth Tynan, which is a collection of his theater reviews. And they are wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. They can be biting. But they don't wander, like a certain other critic I've been talking about in this video. They don't wander. And they're icily insightful, not just about the play right in front of him, because a theater critic is dealing with something even more ephemeral than a movie critic or a book critic, right? A book critic reviews a book. The book is still there the next day. The performance that the theater critic saw is gone, and most theater critics don't see more than one performance of the show they're reviewing. Most of them don't. And in order to do anything even remotely close to reviewing a book, you would have to see them all. And they don't do that. They see one, and sometimes leave. And sometimes are talking the whole time. How maddening if you are a director of a show that could really use a good review in the Times, the Herald Tribune, to see the theater critic in the beautiful seat that you provided talking through the whole show. You want to stop the show and just tell him, could you please pay attention? But anyway, Tynan was a great theater critic, and his observations about the plays themselves, apart from the particular performance that he's watching, are amazing. Him on Shakespeare alone is worth this book. I have to resist the urge to go down the slippery slope. Instead, I will just enjoy the heck out of rereading this, and I'll put it with my theater criticism, with my literary criticism, and call it a day. And then this is another one that goes in that bookcase. This is another collection of book reviews. Never seen it before. It also has a library dust jacket. I hesitated for a minute because I'm on the outs with the author. The author is A.N. Wilson, the British historian A.N. Wilson, who I believe has been getting worse as time goes on in his mainstream published work. I believe that published work has been getting worse and worse. In bad ways. I mean, it'd be bad anyway, but the way that it would get worse and worse usually is that the writer's powers are thinning as he gets older. That I could sort of live with, but Wilson's powers have struck me in several of his books in the last, say, 15 years as not only weaker, but curdled, untrustworthy. And I don't know, the next time, if he comes out with another major work, I will probably fall on it and see, is this true? Can I make a case for abandoning this author, which I almost never do. Almost never. But if he writes another major work of history, if he's still alive, I think he is still alive, if he writes another major work of history, and I go into it with an open mind but wary, and I find that kind of crap, I will probably just abandon him for the rest of his writing life. But that isn't often the case when you're writing book reviews. Usually you have an editor writing over you that is not going to let you do that sort of thing, even if you're Christopher Hitchens. And I found a collection of his that I haven't had, and I don't think I ever have. This is Essays and Reviews from 1977 to 1986. It's called Pen Friends from Porlock. Yet another Samuel Taylor Coleridge allusion. I swear, we should almost retire all mentions of the friend from Porlock. But this has all sorts of stuff in it. There are essays in here, including, as you can see, an essay about Venice. But there's all sorts of book reviews in here that I'm sure I haven't seen. I'm sure that I haven't, that they showed up in the New Statesman or the Guardian or something like that. And I never saw them. And he can be quite good. I will go into this with a little bit of hackles up. This was a long time ago. This was back when I wasn't detecting anything like this. His book on the Victorians, his book on Tolstoy, his book on After the Victorians, those are great books. I love them. And they had none of what I'm talking about in them. So this is around that period. So, and this has a library covering as well. So I will go through this and probably enjoy it. Probably I'll annotate the hell out of it. And then it will go on that bookcase, that incredibly, hysterically, comically overcrowded bookcase. I really need to rethink things around here. Then we have a couple of books on Shakespeare. The first one is, this was part of a series that Viking did about 40 years ago. Some of you will remember them. I used to have them all, and I used to recommend the hell out of them to people. I used to recommend these by the bushel to customers. It was the Friendly series. Do any of you remember that? The Friendly Jane Austen, the Friendly Universe? I found the Friendly Shakespeare, which I've had before. I've had this many times before, but as soon as I saw it, I realized I don't have it. This has the whole of several plays. It has great excerpts from other plays. It has all sorts of quotes about Shakespeare, encountering Shakespeare, reading Shakespeare with or without notes. There's an essay at the beginning on why Shakespeare is so incredible, followed by an essay on why Shakespeare is so boring by a different writer. There's there are brief factual breakdowns of each play, when it was written, when it was shown, where it comes from, that sort of thing. Just a wonderful compendium for Shakespeare. There's probably literally nothing written in this book that I don't know. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's such a delightful project. I'm going to clean this up. You can't really tell, but it's got a little schmutz on the cover. I'm going to clean this up, maybe put a dust jack on it myself, and reread chunks of it. Because my interest in Shakespeare is evergreen. Including this next book, which I had once upon a time, and I was in terrible shape. The copy that I have was in terrible shape. And yet, even so, an overnight guest saw it and said, I will never see a copy of this thing. And I've heard about it endlessly. In the right quarters, in the quarters where you would hear about it. And I just, the big puppy dog eyes, and I said, well, of course you should take it then. And I knew that I was being played, but I don't mind, because that friend's point, the unspoken point, is true, which is that I have the Brattle. And a lot of people, a lot of book lovers don't. They don't have anything like it. If I knew that by hearsay when that friend hot-fingered that book from my collection years ago, I certainly know it from direct evidence now. Because a lot of you, hundreds of you have told me stories about where you live. And it sounds horrifying. The stories have very, very many familiar notes in common. That we had a great bookstore, but it closed. That we used to have a couple of great used bookstores, but they're gone. That the nearest bookstore of any interest at all is an hour's drive one way. That's rough. So that's why I let it go. That's why on this channel you will hear the refrain often that I had a copy and I gave it to somebody. That's why I do. Because the Brattle will provide. And most people can't say that. Most people don't have anything like that. So I let it go. And I said, the Brattle will provide. It's been a long time, but the Brattle did, and it provided a perfect condition copy, much unlike mine, my old one. This is by Charlton Ogburn, and this is The Mysterious William Shakespeare. The myth and the reality. Oh, well, I see two portraits there. One is Shakespeare, and one is the Earl of Oxford. This is kind of the Bible of the Oxfordian school of the Shakespeare authorship controversy. I'm in the mood to read about that more right now than I ever have been, and every time I go, I have just a whole shelf of books on Shakespeare, on Shakespeare's time, legitimate biographies like Peter Ackroyd's and whatnot, but also tons and tons of books on the Shakespeare authorship controversy. And every time I go back to those books, no matter who it is, Contested Will or whatever, I always pine for Ogburn's book. Since I got rid of it, I always pine for this book. It's monumental. It's incredibly well-researched. And now I have it again. So I'm going to put one of those library dust jackets on this thing. I'm going to keep this volume no matter what anybody does, no matter what anybody says. And then the final book that I want to show you from the Brattle is an example of another Brattle thing that can happen. I've often mentioned these things. The Brattle is often great for second chances, where it will show you a book that you passed on a while ago. That's especially true for book reviewers and book section editors and whatnot, who get tons of books in the mail, deal with them, and then get rid of them. And a lot of them go to the Brattle. And then you regret your decision. A month passes, a year passes, and you think, oh, well, I didn't want that. And now that I'm thinking about it, I really wish I still had a copy of that book, and it will turn up at the Brattle as a second chance. And a whole bunch of other things that the Brattle does. It will often challenge you with authors. It will insistently push at you authors that you don't think you like. And another thing that the Brattle encourages you to do is make mistakes that you know are mistakes, that you know are a bad idea. Because the prices are so low, because the sale lot, everything is so cheap. I found in the sale lot a book that I have wanted to pour through and get my hands on and grub all around since it came out, probably in the 1970s. I had it stocked in the bookstore where I worked for a long, long time. I was always afraid to touch it. It's a huge, ornate thing. I was afraid that if I touched the copy that we had in the store, I would ruin it and I would have to pay for it. And I seldom see it in the wild in the used bookstores with the box. I often see the book, but I knew that there was at least one printing of the book with the box. And I found that today, and it was $3. So I grabbed it, even though it's as big as a house. It was as big as a house. The leather shoulder bag that I'm still field testing looked at this book and said, "You've got to be kidding me. I've been in a closet for a year and you want me to do this?" It's this thing. It's the Viking. It's the Viking in this huge thing. Look at the size of this. This weighs 5 pounds. But it is beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. Just full of photography and original artwork. Tons and tons of notations. Just, oh. This was meant to be just this huge thing. It's a Time Life book. It was meant to be just this huge thing that sat on your coffee table, in or outside the box, and was meant to be kind of the final word about Vikings for a popular reader in the day. Research has gone on from there. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people would say, "Oh, look at that." Well, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people would call this outdated. Now, I would be willing to bet that 90% of it is not outdated, but I've never actually played around with this thing. I've never actually seen everything that was in it and actually, God forbid, read it. Oh my God. Box sets and I do not get along. Oh God. I can almost never get things to go back in where they belong. If Mark Richardson is watching, he is having flashbacks right now, like to Nam. I finally found a copy of this that's completely affordable. $3. All I needed to do was lug it back here. And now I get to play around with it. I'll just assume that I'm never going to give it up to anybody. I'll assume that I'm never going to resell it or anything like that. I'll still try to be careful with it, but I can finally lay my hands on it and read it. It's going to be a bit of a comfort challenge to read a thing this big, but I'll manage. I'll find a way. And so that's it. That was the Brattle Book Haul for this beautiful spring day. I'm not even making a pretense. Ordinarily, I make a pretense of saying I went to the Brattle on such and such a day because a winter is coming, because storms are coming. I don't believe that any storms are coming. I have officially given up on this season. It's not going to happen. Instead, it's going to warm to spring without ever us having winter. No snow, no sleet, no cold of any kind, really gone in 12 hours, so no need to think about it. Certainly not true for the rest of the country. Lots of parts of the rest of the country. But Boston this year, a complete wash. I think. Unless March surprises me, but I think it will. But so I finally got this, and I'm not sure that this is 5 pounds. I'm pretty sure that this is not going to make a Steve peeler if possible. We'll give it a try. We have the Viking in a box. At long last, I get to play around with this thing. We have the Mysterious William Shakespeare by Charlton Ogburn. We have the Friendly Shakespeare, part of that series, the only one I currently have. We have Pen Friends from Porlock, the periodic work of A.N. Wilson. We have Curtains by Kenneth Tynan, his best-selling and famous book of theater criticism. We have Storm, part of a series, an anthology series, this one about storms on land and sea. We have collected essays of Graham Greene. They aren't essays, they're book reviews, but nevertheless. We have a Penguin classic of Paradise Lost. How amazing. And then, oh my God. Oh my God. Here, let's put those aside. and show you the last two things nice and peacefully, which is a Penguin Classic of 14 Byzantine rulers and a Penguin Classic of this old version of the 20s. No other penguin. Ed and Wilson had a couple of other mass market penguins, or mass market paperbacks, but nothing with a stylish look like this. So there you go. Another trip to the Brattle. This was a trip without David Murphy. It was a trip without anybody. It was a trip even without annoying other shoppers. I had the entire sale lot to myself for the whole time that I was there. I never thought I'd miss those irritating buggers, but I kind of did. But anyway, those are just some more books to go on the pile. I am really hoping, of course, for keepers. I'm always hoping for keepers when I go to the Brattle. I'm hoping that I'm not just lugging the stuff here only for them to lug it back. I'm hoping that for keepers and also occasionally for books that come in this room. This is my little book room. This is my sanctum sanctorum. This is where the books I love the most come. Now, I know that the 14 Byzantine rulers will, because it's replacing a volume that's in here. And I'm pretty sure, I know that the Penguin Classic Paradise Lost will as well, because I have a bookcase for Penguin Classics. But the rest of these, I don't know. The anthologies of critical work, probably not. The Viking book might come in here. I'll have to see. I'll have to see if it's as wonderful as it looks. But anyway, that's our Brattle trip for today. I don't think I'll be going back to the Brattle this week. Will have to be next week. And next week, I'll be going to the Brattle with a squinty challenge in my eye. Am I able to go to the Brattle next week? Or is it snowing? It feels alien and weird even to mention that. It is not going to snow. It is not going to snow here in Boston. I'll eat crow if it does. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.